Hey guys, welcome to a new process video from me. This is going to be my September 10 cards 1 homemade kit video, and I'm going to start off with the card number 1. So with this one, I decided I wanted to play with the animals, and one that was really cute was the dog inside a pumpkin. And so I've kind of stamped it and played around with the markers that I had pulled for my kit and colored it in. So and some I did like 3 of them until I was happy with the result. So I'm cutting out some pattern paper. I use that kind of gold foiled Halloween. That's gonna be basically my sentiment for this card. And then I did cut a circle from white cardstock just using a circle die. And then I'm going to cut out the animal because I don't have the die that goes along with this particular stamp, that I'm just fussy cutting it, which is totally fine. And then I wanted to add the ribbon. I use the solid orange ribbon that has a little bit of a kind of ruffle on the edges of it. And I also wanted to use this wreath from the Autumn Blessings stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that with brown ink, and it's going to go in the center of this circle. My initial plan was that to have the wreath just kind of surround the animal cut, but the wreath was a little bit smaller than I had wanted, and then I have this big space on the sides of the circle, and so I decided to pull out those brads that I had put for this kit, and then I'm going to poke some brads on there. Initially, I thought, well, maybe I can put the little dog in the pumpkin onto the bottom left of the circle so that my brads don't have to go all the way around. But I really just like the idea of filling in the space, and so the little guy is going to be in the center, and then it's going to be surrounded by these small glittered brads. I believe these brads are from We Are Memory Keepers, but I'm not sure because um, all of my little, I think they're a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 of an inch brads. They're all together, so they're from various manufacturers. And because the putting of the brads was kind of a last minute thing, I didn't even have my brad poker that I usually use, and so I just used the pin that was holding my ribbon down onto its spine, and so that's why it was taking me a little longer to make my holes. So now I'm ready to assemble this card, and I'm starting off by adhering the papers onto each other and then also the ribbon. And I'm going to attach the back side of those ribbons onto the pattern paper using some washi tape. And then I decided that this little circle element needs to be popped up, and so I'm going to add some fun foam to that. I'm going to put that on the bottom left, or bottom right, I should say, of the card. And then I'm using a beige cardstock base that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch as a regular A2 size card, and that's going to be my card base. And then I needed to tie a ribbon, so that's what I'm gonna be adding to the top right, because it just seems like it's a little bit imbalanced. It needed something orange, more orange over to the top right. You can hear that with some glue dots, and then I was looking at the little animal, and it just needed a little bit more something. So I actually have a Wink Stella, but for some reason my Wink Stella is not working properly. It just clobs, and it's been a big mess. So I haven't really used it. I should just throw it away and get a new one, because I'm sure it's human error, but I couldn't make that to work. And so I pulled out my tonic Nouveau Crystal something paste, I think it's called, and that's what I used there. So one of the things that I pulled out for this homemade kit was this foil pack that I have from around the block, and I tried it onto white cardstock, but I was not happy with the results, and that was what I was showing you earlier, the black part, or that has a bunch of little pieces in there. It just seems like I know it's because it's old, but it wasn't adhering properly, and it was just making a big mess. And so I decided that I was just going to throw the rest of that away, but I am going to use the stars from this specific one that I've tried out, and that's going to go on this paper just to dress it up. And again, I'm using some of that solid ribbon, and then I'm going to tie a bow to the center of it. And so the sentiment will be the one, the happy Halloween that's on that bracket that you see on the bottom. That is from that pattern paper. So here I am, I'm fussy cutting those stars. Like I said, I don't know if you can tell, but some of the areas of the paper has some foiling in them, and some it did not stick. And I've learned that once you adhere that foil onto the paper, you can't like re-adhere it so that it will, you know, completely cover the image. And so I just abandoned that, and just trying to make the most of what I can from the set. So now I've cut all of my stars. I cut 5 of them, and then I'm adhering all of the items onto each other now. And one of the reasons why this card seems to have gone fast is because I actually have pre-planned the cards, like not pre-planned, but kind of pre-designed what I'm gonna do. This is my, I think this is my 4th one card, I mean 10 cards, one homemade kit video, maybe 4th, 3rd, can't remember. But I have learned over making those ones that I need to plan ahead as to what I'm doing, because I have very um, little time to actually sit down and videotape these, because you know I'm a mom, and I have to work around my kids' nap time. So if I plan everything, then I will be able to get all my videos done in one sitting, and that's what I did. And I also added some brads to that just to give it a little bit more dimension, and that's card number 2. Now card number 3 is one of my favorites from this set. I went and started off with stamping this not spider, but the Batman, the bat, not the Batman, Grace, the bat onto just white scrap of paper. And so I'm going to stamp that a few times. I stamped it more than what I needed because I made a mistake on one of them. And I have a foam on the bottom of my paper just to make sure that the image gets stamped really well. And so I'm going to fussy cut these, just 3 of these bats. And then I'm going to work on the rest of my card. You know, sometimes it's convenient to have die cut sets along with your stamped images, but for this particular one, since I don't have it, it doesn't take too long to cut it out, so I'm totally fine. Now the 6x6 pad that I've chosen for this particular kit had this paper that has a bunch of cut apart sheets, and so I cut out my sentiment that says Spooktacular, and that's gonna go on the page. Now I have the another paper that I've cut and created a frame, and that one is the kind of pumpkin orange, or jack-o'-lantern I should say, paper, and then I adhered fun foam on the back side of that because I wanted that to be raised. I'm also adhering some fun foam to the sentiment so that I can raise that up as well. Now the bats are going to go behind the frame, and I just love how the color of the card stands out a lot using the black cardstock as my base. So I did cut the foot of the feet of the bat on the very bottom because I didn't want the feet to show outside of the frame. I want it all to be contained. And then I'm using some white pen to draw some lines so that it looks like they're hanging down from their spider web. And then I have this itty bitty star from the Lawn Fawn set that I pulled out for this kit, and I'm just adding a bunch of stars onto the cardstock itself just to give it a little bit more interest. I also added some more of that glimmer paste, Nouveau glimmer paste, onto the bats so that they will shine. And I just love the results of this, and I want to make sure that I make a mental note to try to do this design again with other things, like, you know, flowers maybe, or add other creatures or animals because it's fairly easy to do, but I just love how fun it is. And also I love how I was able to create kind of my own background with the stars. So that is card number 3. Card number 4 is this one that entitled Thanks You're My Hero. So with this one, I wanted to start off coloring this superhero owl. And as you can see, I'm just using the scraps from that paper where I had done the foiling. So I'm stamping part of my sentiment as well as the um, the owl, and then I pulled out my alcohol markers as the Spectrum Noir, and then I'm going to color it in. Now, I'm not very good with coloring. I have to say that off the bat. So this is not like super wonderful coloring, and not very good with shading and all that good stuff yet. But I'm still enjoying the process of coloring, so I'm not going to kind of give up on this, even though I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. But I'm having fun. So I'm starting off with that gray one, and then one of my YouTube subscribers have suggested that I create a little, um, what is that called? Like a little guide, I should say, a little guide for my colors, from the pens. And so that's what I have on the left side, as you can see. And it has been really helpful because then I can tell exactly what the color of the marker is before I even open it up. So it has helped a lot. So thank you so much for that suggestion. And if you have any suggestions for me, make sure that you leave that in the comment section below, because I do read them. I don't often answer as fast as I can, but I do read them, and I always hit either heart or like on all of them, even if I don't answer. So now that that owl is done, I'm going to cut my sentiment into a strip and then cut the left side of that into a notch. So that's done. Now I'm going to pull together all of my card. Now I'm starting off with the craft card base, and I'm cutting this scrap of striped paper, and that's going to go on the top and the bottom. This gray cardstock was run through my Cuddle Bug using the stars embossing folder, and then the things is cut from a My Favorite Things die set, and I cut that 3 times with some kind of burnt orange cardstock, and then I'm going to layer those 3 on top of each other to give my thanks word a little bit of dimension. I'm using some liquid glue to adhere that on top of each other. I'm going to put a stamping block on top of that while it's drying to make sure that all of those elements get sandwiched off and gets adhered um, together very well. So that's my block right there, and then the little owl's gonna go on the top so that it looks like he's flying, and then my sentiment is going to go on the bottom left of the page, or of the card I should say. So put some stamping block on there, and then this is going to go with some fun foam. I am going to adhere some more glimmer paste to that just to give my little owl a little bit of shine. Oh, before that, I felt like the bottom piece just felt a little bit like it's missing something. So I have a scrap of the black with orange dot paper, and I just wanted a really skinny side of that onto the bottom, and I think that finishes off the card. It just felt like everything was hanging, and it wasn't totally like I didn't have a finished look for me, so that's why I added that strip of paper. And then now I'm adding the glimmer paste. So once that's all dried, I'm going to trim the excess, and there you go. That is my card. So on to the next card. with this one, I wanted to create my own background paper that's going to go in the center. So that white cardstock that I actually ran through my die cut machine using a rectangle stitch die, and that's going to be the center of my card. I have the pumpkin, and I'm stamping that with some orange ink from Studio G that I got from Michaels. Now I should have gotten a darker orange because it's very light, but I'm okay with that as well, because since it's acting like a background paper, I didn't want it to be too strong of a color, because then all the rest of the stuff that goes on top of it will have to compete with the dark color background. So at the end of the day, it worked out. This brown cardstock, I ran it through my Cuttlebug using that floral border die cut, no, embossing folder, I should say. And then I have a circle here that I wanted to stamp the wreath onto. Now this circle is a little bit smaller than the one that I used for the first one, so I knew that parts of those wreath will actually go outside of the lines, and that's totally fine with me. I'd rather have that go on the edge than have all that big space in the center of it. But I didn't like how it was looking onto my page. I felt like if I were to put that circle, that it will cover up some of that floral design of the border strips. So I went with a rectangular base for my sentiment, and I actually stamped that onto some of the pattern paper that has a subtle text to it. And I went with a rectangle design for sentiment instead of the circle that I had originally planned. And that's going to go tucked in behind this floral strip that I'm just trimming down because it didn't seem like it was a perfect straight edge. So I needed to trim that a little bit with my scissors. And then I inked the edges of my sentiment block, and then adhered the border on top of that. And it needed a little bit more something, so I'm going to grab some twine, and then I'm going to thread that through the card base. The card base is the red kind of shimmery paper cardstock that I had pulled for this kit, and then I'm going to cut that or wrap that twine around a couple of times onto the base, and then tie the ends into a bow, and then trim the excess. So one of the things that I hate the most when it comes to ribbons, or especially twine, is that sometimes it gets twisted around on itself, and you don't get that perfect bow around your ribbons. So if you have any suggestions on how I can make sure that I don't have those twisted bows, let me know, and I will try that in the next for my next project that I have twine or embroidery floss. And so for finishing touches, I decided to add a few brads to the centers of the embossed flowers. And that's going to do it. This was card number 5, I believe. Okay, now we go on to the next card. So this one's another Halloween card. I'm starting off by stamping these critters onto white cardstock, and I'm going to color them. And you're not going to see me color them in the video, but I'm stamping them with some hybrid ink because I'm using, with this one I actually used a bunch of different markers. I used of course the alcohol markers from Spectrum Noir, but I also used some chameleon pens as well for this, and so I'm all done with that. And I also heat embossed the sentiment onto the white cardstock as well. I actually also fussy cut the animals around it, so it's ready to go. Now I have this piece of scrap paper. It's a glittery cardstock that had the center open, and so I filled in that circle with the text paper. I love that text paper. It's so vintage. It's so cool looking when it comes to these Halloween images. So that's going to go in the back, and then it's going to be adhered onto a black cardstock, and then trim off the excess, of course. And then I'm just going to lay down my animals, see where they are best suited. And so 2 are going to go on the top, and then the third one's going to be on the bottom with the long strip of sentiment that's going to go in the center. I am going to cut the short edges short ends of this strip into notches so that I can adhere that on the center. And I also added some fun foam to that. So, but before I adhere it, I'm going to use some glue dots to adhere my animals. Now I decided to do glue dots so that I can kind of curl the edges of the animals, and so that it will kind of have a little bit of dimension and it looks like the animals are actually coming to life. Well, in my eyes anyways. And then I decided that it needed a little bit of something on the edges, and so I'm going to find some brads to go on the edges of the orange glittered cardstock, and I just happened to find some stars which worked perfectly for this because I'm also going to be adding some stars on this, stamping some stars in the circle, and you'll see that in a little bit. But now I have some stars on the edges. And it needed a little bit something again, and so now I'm going to find my little itty bitty star stamp, and then add some stamps along, and it just, it, for me, it made that paper just come to life a little bit more. It matched the sentiment and it's not so boring in my eyes anyways. Okay, so next card, I just wanted to play with the pattern papers, so I cut 4 of the pattern papers into I think it was like a 1 3/4 inch blocks by 4 inch, like, so 4 inch long by 1 1/4 width, I believe. And then I'm going to tuck some of them under each other. And then I have this sentiment. This is also from that same die cut set that the thanks was from. It's from My Favorite Things. It has thanks and hello. And this one was also cut 3 times, 2 with the burnt orange and then 1 with the yellow. I mean, 1 with the white, sorry. At first, I thought that maybe I should do the burnt orange, but because of all of the colorful background, I needed to stick with the white so that it will stand out against that. And it was actually, it needed a little bit of a vellum to go in between the sentiment and also the pattern paper. Also, again, to make the sentiment stand out a little bit more. Now, that brown strip of cardstock was run through my die cut machine with using that star embossing folder again. And this one needed a little bit more something, so I am grabbing some twine from American Crafts, and I'm going to use the black twine to go around just on top of that embossed star brown strip of paper, tying that twice and then finishing off the ends with a bow. There you go. And so now I'm going to pull my handy dandy brads. I think I've used brads on almost all of these cards, which is great because one of my purposes for this is, you know, of course, to use up my stash. So that's what I've been doing here, and it makes me feel good. I am going to add some brads onto 4 of the corners of the vellum, just to, again, emphasize the sentiment here because of the very colorful background. I feel like sometimes it could get lost. And there you have it. There is my card. Okay, so on to the next card. I think this one was my 7th, I believe. So with this one, I heat embossed with black embossing powder. Heat embossed these spiders, and then I'm going to do a blending of and creating some colorful background. So I started off with, I used 2 colors of distress ink here. I used Spice Marmalade and Ripe Persimmon. And at first, you know, because I'm new to all of this blending and card making and all that stuff, so as you can see, I forget to dust off my blending tool onto a piece of scrap paper before I run it through the pad. So some parts would have like a major bulk of the color, but then later on I learned that I could, I mean, I remembered anyways to add, to dust off my blending tool before I put it onto my paper, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just rubbing it all together and just making sure that I'm happy with the results. And then I grab my water spray and just kind of splatter some water there. And I really love the effect of that when it comes to the distress inks, because it reacts to water, and so you have these circles or splatters of paint or ink that comes off, and it's really cool effect, and I love it. And so I die cut the banner using some, I think it's an Inspired by Stamping die cut, and then I'm going to stamp Wishing You a Spooky Halloween. And that's actually the long sentiment that I used for, I think, card number 5. And I just cut the stamps. It doesn't hurt your stamp if you cut it, especially the acrylic ones. So I just cut that to make sure that I can still have the sentiment without it being really long. And I decided to adhere that with fun foam. And of course, I'm going to trim off the edges or the excess of that paper, just figuring out where it's going to best go. And as you can see, instead of using white cardstock, I actually use the backside of the pattern paper. That helps me to be more efficient with my scrapbooking. It helps me save some papers, but at the same time, I'm able to use something that I would like the pattern paper, probably something that I wouldn't want to use, but then the backside, which is just plain white, is very flexible for me, so that's why I did that. And it needed a little bit more something, and so I grabbed, of course, my brads. It's been my favorite finishing touch for these cards, and I'm just adding 2 star brads on 3 different areas of the card to create a visual triangle, and that's going to do it for this particular card. Okay, so with this one, I kind of wanted to veer away from the typical Halloween autumn colors, and I also, because I forgot that I had these Crayola markers and I wanted to use them. So I am just going to be creating a rainbow background using a border stamp from that Autumn Blessings stamp set from Inspired by Stamping. And I used all of the markers, and again, it's just so easy. You just rub the marker on to the stamp, and then stamp it onto the paper. The thing of it is because this border is not a long one, that I had to stamp it over again, and I should have, because it's kind of a checkered type of design. What I should have done, if I was thinking right, when the moment that I was doing this, was to overlap the edges so that the design of the checkered would be one continuous one instead of 2, because you can totally see, I don't know if you see it right now in your screen, but you could totally see that in the center of that, you can see that they're not connected. They're not one seamless border, and so next time I have to remember that. But you will see too that it works out all in the end, because it's going to be covered up with some of the brown cardstock that I'm going to add to this. But as you can see, I'm just using Roy G. Biv for the background, and there is my background there. Now I'm going to trim this to about 5.25 by 4. Yeah, that's the size, so that it's a little bit smaller than the card base. And I'm using a red glitter card, shimmery card base for that. Now, once I trimmed it, I noticed that on the top it didn't fill in all of that, so I had to get my stamp again and then fill it. So this brown cardstock has been run through my Cuttlebug using a star embossing folder, and then I cut out a die cut circle on white paper, and then I also heat embossed the word grateful onto that circle element, and that's going to go onto the the banner, the star banner flat. And then I have these small Teresa Collins little letter stickers, and that's going to spell for you. So if you are new to my channel or you just specifically watch my card videos, I hope that you'll take a time to watch my scrapbooking videos as well, because as you can see, a lot of the techniques that I use for card making, I also use for scrapbooking and vice versa. So, and also the products, like if you think about this this little letter sticker sheet, it's mostly used for scrapbooking, but because they're small letters, it's the perfect size also to make sentiments for cards. So I grabbed some regular beige twine. Here's what I'm talking about the bows kind of twisting on itself. I don't know if you noticed that, but I was twisting, well, untwisting it so that you can see some perfect bows to that. And it works out, but sometimes it's just such a pain to find the perfect um, way to do that. Okay, so now we're on the last card. With this one, I wanted to go back to a Halloween theme, and I really, really love this spider web paper. It has gold foiling for the webs and black background. I thought it was very sophisticated. It was just, it was lovely, if you can say that for a Halloween type of paper. But I really liked it, and I wanted to use it, but I knew it was a very kind of strong paper, so I can't use it just like a full background, because then it will overpower everything else that goes on top of it. So I just used it, I cut it into 1/4 inch strips, and then use it as a frame. And then I stamped those three little critters again, and then colored it in with more alcohol inks using Spectrum Noir and what's the other one? Um, Chameleon pens, that's what it is. And then I also heat embossed the sentiment with some gold ink. I felt like the gold ink matched the gold foiling of the spider web. And I also added some glimmer paste to each of the critters to make them shine. And then I'm going to add them with just some glue dots, so they're going to go on flat. But because I have the glue dots, I can curl the edges of these animals to give them a little bit more life. But the sentiment I'm going to add with some fun foam so that it will be raised. Just trimming that off. And then that's going to go on the top center. And then just to finish off this card, again, I'm going back to my brads, and I'm going to add, instead of circle brads, I felt like I could switch it up a little bit and use some square brads. Now these square brads are kind of a color of light blue, sky blue, and it worked out fine, even though it doesn't really match the Halloween theme that I have. But because it was light and everything else seems dark in this card, it actually works out good because it balances out all of those dark images there. So that is card number 10. And then here's just a little bit of a look of what's left. I never used that other ribbon, and that's just going to go back in my stash. These are the stamps, and of course they're just going to go back in my stash as well as the embossing folders and also the Crayola markers. And then I have a bunch more of the 6x6 paper along with scraps that's going to go. Now this foiling thing, I didn't like it, so that is going to go in the trash. And then these are the cards that I have created. I hope that you've enjoyed this process video, and I hope that you guys will be inspired to put together your own kit, whether you buy it from a specific company or you make your own, which I suggest would be fun to do once in a while, so you can use up your stash and make 10 handmade cards. And if you guys like this videos, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will catch you guys another day. Bye.